the catch-22 of seeking help is it can be difficult, maybe impossible, to seek help without being labeled as having PTSD, and therefore, you risk being pulled off the job, put on a desk. I can't tell you how many firefighters and law enforcement that I personally know who have raised a hand saying, "I'm not well, I'm not okay," and the system it's almost like a punishment. It's like, boom, you got PTSD, go sit in the corner, and we're not putting you on duty. So then you've taught everybody, don't ask for help, because you're gonna get sat down.
So, hey, welcome to the 10-8 podcast today, gentlemen. Hit that like and subscribe button, as I'm instructed to tell you to do. We're up to, I think, 18 true followers.
Yes, that's right.
And
my mom thinks it's great.
Your mom thinks it's great. Well, my kids laugh at me every time they see one. So, but today, very special today. We've got our old friend Dan Bradley joining us from the High Ground Foundation. He's on video. Look at that hair. It's absolutely perfect.
It's amazing.
Look at it. It's
amazing. Look at him.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then all the way from Hawaii, Dr. Chris Frueh, who is a subject matter expert in so many different things.
That's true.
The research that he's done over the last 30 years. Is it 30 years, Doc, or a little bit more now?
Yeah, 30 and counting.
30 and counting.
33.
33. Wow. But just working with our military, our veterans, subject matter expert in PTSD, numerous other things, written numerous books, over 300 scientific articles. We'll talk about some of the books you've written that are subject matter related, and then kind of maybe get off into your other writing. I'm kind of interested in that as well. And but we're here today to talk about specifically Dr. Frueh's book on operator syndrome, which was written specifically for our special operations men and women, but we have found there's such a correlation between that and first responders. That's kind of where we want to talk about, or what we want to talk about today. But Dan, can you kind of talk about your relationship with Dr. Frueh? You're the one who introduced this whole group to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and if I could interrupt, just call me Chris, please. We don't need doctors in this conversation.
and that's why he's the best doctor. Now, back when we did when I came on the 10-8 podcast for the first time, kind of mentioned my relationship with Dr. Frueh. We had worked together at the Talent War Group, basically doing some research together, writing some articles together. But that was in my whole transition period out of the Air Force. And let's be real, I was struggling, right? I was struggling with a lot of things that didn't make sense to me, and I wasn't getting answers, especially from like the medical institution, from the doctors. And just based on, weekly calls with Chris and developing the kind of that trust and understanding, he helped me to understand through the framework of operator syndrome what's actually happening. Whether I had always approached it from it's got to be a physical thing or a mental thing. And his approach to the physical, the mental, the cultural aspects of what your body goes through in certain careers and what your mind goes through in certain careers, how it responds. He just completely framed it in a objectively different way and opened the doors for me to get some of the help that I needed that I would have otherwise never even thought of or found. So I say this with like complete sincerity. Chris and the doors that he opened are, what helped me to get my family squared away, save my family, help me get my life in shape. It's just the impact has been huge. So grateful not just to call him someone that I've worked with or someone that I've gained from, but real good friend.
I got so excited about doing this podcast today and getting started, I forgot to even introduce who all's here today. So let me back up just a little bit. Sergeant Chuck Lewis with Arkansas State Police Wellness Team, just a value member to what we're doing across the state, helping countless first responders across the state of Arkansas. Dr. Chris Clem, Chris, another Chris. But Chris leads our leadership development, wellness research program here with the state of Arkansas and the Department of Public Safety. Jason Lawrence, Deputy Director for Training, and Kelvin Sargent, Deputy Director for the standard side of things. And so, Dan, I remember me and you and Jason were at dinner one night having that exact conversation about, all these issues that we're dealing with, about the approach that we're taking statewide. And I was very much of the same opinion you were. It's either a physical thing or a mental thing, right? And I just so happened, Chris, had listened to your podcast with Team Never Quit with Mark that same day. And we're sitting at dinner in Bentonville and tell Dan that, and Dan pulls your name up and we start texting that night at dinner. And so that's kind of how that was our first introductions. And then we got to meet you here a month or so ago. And I feel like you and I have talked a couple times a week since then. It's been very encouraging for me to see the work that you're doing. You want to just kind of maybe tell us a little bit what led you down that road?
Sure. So I'm a clinical psychologist with got my doctorate in 1992, and then spent 15 years working in the VA with veterans. And that was my goal when I went to graduate school. So I got to accomplish that. And then I left VA in 2006, moved to University of Hawaii, Houston's Baylor College of Medicine, University of Texas, psychiatry department, where I set up a center for veterans mental health. And somewhere about 12 years ago, I'm going to say, I started meeting some people in from the special operations community in Houston, made some friends, started some conversations. Frankly, made the same wrong assumption that most of my colleagues today are still making, which is that if you're a soldier and you deployed to war, you have PTSD, ipso facto. And what I found was the guys I was getting to know and meet and talking to were all struggling in some way or another, but they didn't have PTSD. So I had to learn. And so this was a mixture of SEALs, Green Berets, some intel guys from the intel world who'd been embedded with or worked closely with special operations. One of them was on the Bin Laden team, the search for Bin Laden team. Another was on the Bin Laden raid mission. And what I found was they didn't have PTSD. They just didn't fucking have what they were told they had. And so all the solutions for them were not the right solutions. They, as we got into it, what we found was low testosterone, sleep apnea and insomnia, brain injury that was subtle. It wasn't obvious, and none of them were describing being blown up in IEDs or, massive concussive events that put them out for a week or more at a time. What we came to realize, in years later, was it was blast exposures, the chronic high up tempo of what they were, going out and crushing it day after day for years, and the physicality of the work. And so that kind of was my start years ago. And then that led to, if we fast forward today, I've probably worked now with over 600 operators, defined very loosely to include tactical law enforcement, and then into realizing that this work, and you all have been educating me, realizing that these concepts, this framework that we've called operator syndrome, is relevant for firefighters and police, pretty much across the board. And so I think that's what we're here to talk about some more today. Over.
I was listening to a podcast that you were on with Andy Stump, and he actually made the comment about how it relates. You had kind of opened that door on first responders, and he'd kind of made some of those comments about their deployment tempo. They knew they were going out. They knew they were going to be in country, away from their families, away from their communities. But law enforcement, 12 hours on, sometimes 16. turn around, do it again the next day, policing in your own neighborhood, seeing someone at Walmart later that night that you may have encountered earlier during the day. So how did you see the correlation that you were seeing with our military veterans and what they were doing and our first responders, including firefighters? I know you've done a lot of work with firefighters as well.
Right. Well, so I think what maybe perhaps only Dan and I know, and I'm quite sure Dan knows this as well as I do, the SOF community, the special operations community, and I define operators maybe just a little bit loosely. Yes, I've worked with SEALs, Green Berets, guys from tier units, Canadian JTF2, their Special Operations Regiment. I work with Air Force paramilitary, pararescuemen, combat controllers. They're in the mix somehow. I don't know why.
It's just Dan.
It's just Dan.
It's just Dan. Marine Raiders, Force Recon. So that's kind of the group I've been working with. And we can if we think of operator syndrome as something that can be relevant for everybody in the combat arms, then it became a very short, like, wait a minute, holy shit, this also is relevant for first responders. And so I think something that only in this group, only Dan and I probably know this, but military special operators have so much respect and admiration for first responders. They look to you guys as the heroes. And one of the things that I hear often when I work with operators and they learn I'm working with law enforcement, they're like high-fiving me going, man, that's awesome. Those guys need it more than we do. And what they get into are some of the realities of you have lengthy careers. You're not doing 4-year enlistments. Typically, you have an op tempo that never relents. You are going. You're on shift, and then you go home, and your shift is right there in your hometown, in your home streets. So whereas soldiers, and they point this out to me all the time, they fight the bad guys overseas, far away, and then they come home, and home is something of a sanctuary. They get to let down their guard a little bit. They get to be more relaxed. They're not, yes, they have training evolutions that are very intense, but home is home. First responders, man, when do you ever have an off shift? I mean, you go from whether your shift is a day shift, a night shift, a 48-hour shift, 72-hour shift. You're having constant transitions every time you go from work to home, with the uniform to home, and it's not a 20-hour flight from Iraq to Virginia Beach or Fort Bragg. It's maybe a 20-minute, 50-minute, 10-minute, 5-minute drive from wherever you are to home. And so where's the decompression space? You walk in the door, you've just had an intense day, and 5 minutes later you're there with your families and trying to make sense of that. And what do you bring home with you day to day to day? And then the other piece is, even when you're off duty, so to speak, you're out maybe with your family, maybe you're grocery shopping or a restaurant or a movie or whatever. How do you let down that vigilance? You can't, for the most part.
We don't.
You don't. And everywhere you go, there's landmark reminders. That house over there, this happened. That corner, that tree over there, something happened. Now we're in a restaurant. I've been out socially with police, and I'm always the one that says, you get your back to the wall, because I get it. I'll sit with my back to the room, which I don't ordinarily like to do, but when I'm with first responders, they need to have their backs to the wall because they got to see everything that's happening in there. And that means there's never a letdown. And from a physiological we can talk about the psychological, but from a physiological perspective, what that means is your cortisol levels don't have a chance to come down. You're on constant hyper arousal. constant hypervigilance. And then how do you even turn it off? You go to bed, it's dark, you're in your bed, snuggled up, hopefully with a partner or a favorite dog. I have a cat that snuggles with me. But how do you shut it off?
Yeah.
How do you let your thoughts quiet? How do you quiet those thoughts? So
some of us don't.
Yeah.
Some of us have to be medicated to grab a few hours sleep, you know.
We asked the question, Chris. We asked the question last week to a group of sergeants and above, about 20 or so. Asked the question, how many of you all struggle sleeping? Every hand in the room.
Every single hand in the room.
Every hand in the room went up.
And these are veteran officers with 5 to 30 years of experience, and every single person in the room raised their hands. And based off some of the conversations we had, we started asking about the additional problems they might be having based on their lack of sleep and some of these other things. And it was amazing to hear the answers and how they relate to the conversations that we had had.
yeah, I bet I would imagine if we had that ability to do a full, true, honest survey, and we asked who's not sleeping well, every hand goes up. Who lives with chronic pain? Every hand goes up. Whose testosterone is low or low-ish? And although many guys probably don't know, if we had testing for the whole room, I bet it would be a majority, if not 100%. Who lives with anger problems? Every hand. Who lives with irritability and impatience? Every hand. Who lives with some level of just general anxiety on a constant basis? That physiological sense of not being able to kind of, relax and calm and feel a sense of ease and peace. I'm going to guess every hand. And what else do we want to wonder about? Who struggled with their marriage? I mean, every married person ever has some issues. That's just what marriage is. But what's the divorce rate? What's the rate of conflict? What's the rate of significant challenges in marriages and family, and parenting, and et cetera? What's the rate of cognitive impairments? How many guys have a little trouble, a little reduction in their attention, their short-term memory, their ability to stay organized? And what we see, especially with the cognitive impairments, is with muscle memory, you perform your jobs pretty much perfectly, but it's on the home side. You get home and it's hard to remember what you're supposed to get at the grocery store a little bit. You go from one room to the other room in your house and you're kind of not sure why did I go in here? What's that all about? Headaches. How many guys have headaches? It's probably not 100%, but it's probably pretty high. And if we really could look at the brain, I would expect we would find very high rate of brain injury, maybe not acute, super severe brain injury, but some level of brain harm over time that accumulates.
Wow.
It's like he's following us around.
Yeah. We're sitting there going, oh, okay.
Yep, check.
I'm like, I can't remember what I did yesterday. I put I can't
now I'm
sleep.
angry.
Yeah, now I'm angry. We're talking about it. I'm angry.
Chris, one of the things that we've started doing is recognizing that we have these physiological, psychological issues, relational issues that are developing. We've started approaching it from a holistic approach like you're talking about, recognizing that our environments, our cultures have a lot to do with that. So we've really started addressing this at a leadership level, trying to make our leaders aware of what's going on and then try to create healthy environments. That's been a real significant focus for us. And we know it's not the total answer, but we know it's a significant part of the answer. There's got to be the recognition. Yeah. So we're really attacking that.
Yeah, I mean, if we're asked to do all these things on a daily basis, and then we go back to the team room, the squad house, the station, and the cultural environment is toxic. Right. I mean, it's just adding to. And we know there's a correlation between our right. and the leadership that Correct. And the culture that we're wrapped up in. So, but it's more than that, mm-hmm. So we're touching on that, but we're not addressing so many of these other right. things that we're talking about.
It's this holistic approach.
Yeah.
I really like looking at looking at operator syndrome and what's going on there, going, And I loved when we heard you guys speak recently, Dana and Chris, about it's not just one thing. It's multiple things. It's not just, we can't just give you a shot and everything's going to be okay. We've got to look at all these different areas and address all of them.
And a piece of that is that all of these different things are interconnected with each other, all of the physiological systems. So, although I'm a psychologist, I put physiology forward. So you injure a brain, you're affecting the gut, the endocrine system, the sleep, not just brain health, but you're affecting everything that the brain runs. You injure your arm, and that, let's say you hurt your elbow, and that chronic pain is gonna resonate for a while throughout your whole physiological system. You get your hormones dysregulated, that's going to have cascade effects on all of the system. And so I think part of what I want people to understand, and not just operators, but people who take care of operators and first responders and your families, is that what we're talking about here relates to something we call allostatic load. So allostatic load is the physiological, psychological, spiritual burden of everything you incur in the course of your work, your day, your nights. And these are things that most civilians can't appreciate because they can't see it. They don't understand. They have assumptions, but oftentimes their assumptions are very, very, very naive. And so for any responder, for any firefighter, law enforcement, law officer, to be aware that what we're talking about here is massive allostatic load that's cumulative, meaning it collects over time. Those early injuries, those early impairments in a career, 5 years in, you have more of them collected. 10 years in, you've collected more. They add up over time. And it's inevitable. It's just like a law of physics, gravity. What you throw up in the air is going to come down. And with operator syndrome, with the way it affects first responders, you throw it up in the air, it's going to come down hard eventually.
Doc, one of the things that we do when we are at the recruit level, we ask those young men and women their why. What brought you into the profession? Obviously, we've got a lot, not as many veterans as we used to, but we still have some veterans just that need to serve. But so many of them are carrying baggage into the profession from their childhood. They had some sort of adverse childhood experiences, the ACE things. That was kind of a buzzword catchphrase for a long time. But they're coming into the profession carrying trauma. And then, Chris, what's the data, the number of traumatic events that the average officer sees?
I mean, we're looking at, in a 25 to 30-year career, anywhere from 600 to 1,000 major traumatic incidents that they witness or participate in. So it's going to a murder, a wreck, and then their own personal issues. It could be a divorce, et cetera.
Yeah, but so many of those kids, I say kids, young men and women that we talk to, hadn't been on the job 6 months, but they're carrying their bag's already full.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, that compounds on top of childhood experiences.
Right.
And it's interesting to see that, when we think about high-risk professionals, men and women doing very dangerous jobs to protect the rest of society, whether that's soldiers or responders, we see very high rates across the board of adverse childhoods. And that can be anything from severe neglect, verbal, emotional abuse, but also a lot of physical and sexual abuse. And it's really interesting that when you look at the effects of childhood abuse, some people just like it affects them in a way that kind of tears them down and makes their adult life very, very hard. And many of them don't go on to be as productive maybe as we would otherwise have thought. But then there's people who take it into a profession like law enforcement and they just crush it. Now that it's like they put it in a box and compartmentalize it as they do all the other things that happen along the way, those 600 to 1,000 traumatic events that occur over a career. And all that stuff gets stuffed into the box. But psychologically and physiologically, that becomes a heavy burden, a heavy weight to carry that big box.
That's good.
So, Dr. Frueh, what is your path forward as we're opening up now and realizing how the operator syndrome now at this point is really directed towards first responders? What is our path forward? How do we recognize, what do you see that we need to do in the profession of how to make it better for those who serve right now?
It's a great question.
Yeah. Well, Jason, the operator syndrome is a framework.
Yes, sir.
And it's a framework that can be used. I've certainly made a lot of use out of it, helping veterans who have recently retired with their injuries and their impairments. And so career's over, and now we're taking stock and we're going, wow, holy shit, there's these injuries and there's a lot of them, and they have a weight, and we can address them. Some of my work has been with soldiers and law enforcement who are still in their career, still active. And, think of that as, that journey of from when you start at whatever young age you are to, retirement age. There's potentially decades in there, especially for responders, more so than for most soldiers. But so we can take this framework and we could say, okay, at the beginning of the career, here's some things we need to start doing. Here's some things we can be tracking, and we can get into the details here in a few minutes. But so it's a framework that can be used both for treating downstream injuries and impairments and as a way of mitigating those injuries and impairments and optimizing performance and extending the longevity of a career. So it's a framework that can be used at any point in the individual's lifetime, during and after careers. And then the question of how do we do that is part of, that's a challenge. So for an enlightened state police system through the CLEST program and what you guys are doing, I think a lot of it, as Chris said, a lot of it starts with leadership, the tone that leadership sets, the standards, the expectations, the SOPs. And the culture, to the extent that we can kind of shift some of the culture to appreciating especially the lifestyle issues, prioritizing sleep, which is very, very difficult given schedules and lives. But to the extent that we can prioritize sleep, to the extent that we can reorient diet and lifestyle and, some of the other things, habits that many of us engage in, like alcohol, nicotine, other stuff. All of that stuff is a major part of this, and those are things that each individual has control over. And then how can we reorient the systems maybe to not just call it PTSD? And I think that's another thing. I'll just throw that out there. I think we've grossly way overdiagnosed PTSD. It's the easy button in modern mental health care and medical care. You go to see a PCP and you say, I'm an Air Force combat controller, or I'm a career law enforcement or a career firefighter, you're gonna probably get an assumption on the part of that PCP that you have PTSD. And if you're identified with PTSD, there's a pretty quick formula algorithm that you get hit with, which is psychiatric medications and psychotherapy, both of which might be useful, both of which might be valuable, but also both of which might not be valuable or meaningful or relevant at all.
I think it's interesting, Chris, and I love that comment because, again, taking the holistic approach, and this is, for me, has been real different because I initially was looking at it from a leadership perspective, right?
Yep.
But now I begin to recognize, all right, there's a physical perspective here, there's a relational perspective here, there's a psychological
There's a
perspective
spiritual.
here, there's a spiritual perspective.
And
all those relate.
So we've been doing this, 16 months now, and how many times have we changed course in the last 16 months to add one of these factors to what
Right.
we were doing,
Right.
and it continues to grow because we're getting a better picture of what it really looks like through these relationships with Chris and Dan and these others.
Right. Everybody's bringing a piece in that informs.
Yeah, it's been eye-opening for me, for sure. Chris, have you seen, is there a department, a group of first responders out there that you've actually worked with where you're starting to see them implement and take some of these concepts and put them into practice where you're seeing a difference?
No, but I'm not sure I would be well positioned to see that.
Yeah.
I can tell you some of the groups that are showing interest and receptivity, and you guys would be at the top of that list. You're I mean, you guys are leaders in law enforcement in Arkansas, and you're going, holy shit, we got a little step back and maybe look at it a little broader, look at this through a broader lens. I've done a few things, as you guys know, with the Drug Enforcement Agency, and that was part of our thing. I think about 2 months ago now, almost 2 months ago in Little Rock. The Drug Enforcement Agency, headquartered in Southern California, I presented to them last week, in fact, and have had ongoing conversations with several of their senior agents and leaders. So, but where is it really happening? I think we're just at the very, very, very beginning of bringing it there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the more I think about this and the more I wrap my head around it, I am so appreciative for our military. Served in the military, been there, done that, and so appreciative of that. But the military has a system, whether it's right, wrong, effective, or ineffective, but they have the VA. And that's one of the things that aggravates me about our first responders community is we don't have those resources. We are identifying that we've got all the same problems, maybe at times more problems, but we don't have a system in place to help us. And that, honestly, it angers me. We've talked about this way too many times. I wish we could change this subject. But 5 of the last 6 officers we've lost in Arkansas have taken their own lives because there is no help, no formalized help out there to speak of.
It goes to the local level. And once again, none of us are sitting here blaming anyone.
No, absolutely not.
I want to make sure our listeners understand that. But it is down to the local level. It is that municipality, that sheriff's office, that state agency that goes, maybe we have something and we don't. But honestly, I've never thought about that. What resource do we have to take care of us when we are currently serving and after we are serving?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sarge.
Well, the other step in that, the military, here again, right, wrong, or indifferent, has a lot for the spouses, for the families.
And we don't.
And that's one of my biggest pet peeves, that we're missing the boat a lot of places, but the families where we're really missing the boat, because the family might reach out and say, hey, something's wrong with Chuck.
Sure.
Chuck, and in the cases you and I were talking about, these last 5, one of those families may have known something, but most of them didn't. And if they had they wouldn't even have really known.
Who would they have called?
Right. And of course, we're talking about leadership. To Chuck, there's 2 different leaderships. There's my age. Yeah. You and I've talked about this, that the leaderships, you got to change their mind about wellness before you even start to lead.
Yeah, suck it up, Buttercup.
Yes, right.
Do the job.
And then you've got the younger generation that's trying to lead, but they've got this older guy that's saying, oh, no, that's part of the job.
Yeah, there's going to be a cultural shift.
But the family, I think that's the biggest thing is where we're missing is the immediate family within that officer, in that fireman. That's where we've got to have a resource somehow, some way for them. Hey, Chuck, come home, and I'm worried about him. And
who do I call?
Yeah.
Who do I call?
What can I do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That won't cost my significant other, my loved one, their job and their identity, which is that badge and that gun.
And of course, that's what most of them have said. Come home and, I've had a bad day. And we don't call anybody because I got to keep this job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. So, Chris, I mean, that's a huge stigma we're challenged with in law enforcement. Is that magical line of, can he perform the job or is he too far gone?
Right. So if we just kind of dig into those details a little bit, deeper, the catch 22 of seeking help is it can be difficult, maybe impossible, to seek help without being labeled as having PTSD, and therefore, you risk being pulled off the job, put on a desk. I can't tell you how many firefighters and law enforcement that I personally know who have raised a hand saying, "I'm not well, I'm not okay," and the system it's almost like a punishment. It's like, boom, you got PTSD, go sit in the corner, and we're not putting you on duty. So then you've taught everybody, don't ask for help, because you're gonna get sat down. And if we go back to the VA issue for just a moment, it isn't just that you don't have a unified, visible healthcare system available for you with some standardization across the country. There's a couple other pieces there. One is, the VA is a form of advocacy for veterans, and they work with big VSOs on federal policy, state initiatives. That not having a big VA like bureaucracy for veterans does, they're not, the VA is not perfect, so we can acknowledge that, but it does mean there are people who are appointed and hired to be advocates. Who advocates for law enforcement? Who is there for you guys? And there's two pieces of this that I want to highlight. One is I know there's foundations for first responders, but they're not able to raise the money, develop the awareness that some of the massively large veteran foundations do. And so if I'm talking to an operator, I can say, you know what, you need some help. Who can cover down on that? Who could pay to fly somebody to a treatment center and cover on that treatment? There's often foundations that can do that. Not always, not perfect, but at least something. I don't know much of anything like that for first responders. The second piece is, where's the research? Where are the medical studies enlightening us, teaching us about what's going on with police and fire? The VA funds a lot of research for veterans. The Department of Defense funds a lot of research for soldiers and veterans. So a couple years ago, I went and looked to see, well, what does the medical research on police look like? And for every medical study on police health in the medical literature, there's 5 for veterans. So it's a 1-to-5 ratio. That's not really sufficient to take care of our police. And by the way, if we look at firefighters, it's even worse. It's 1-to-15. That ratio is one study on firefighters to 15 on veterans. So we have a large industry studying the health of veterans, but we have almost nothing studying the health of responders.
Well, and Dan, I think one of the questions I would ask you is, so we formed this partnership with the High Ground Foundation, which we're ecstatic about the opportunity for you guys to work with our first responders across the country. But I bet those resource numbers are very similar. I bet it's 10-to-1 foundational resources for veterans versus first responders.
Yeah, you're right. It's roughly 10-to-1, and frankly, that's ridiculous. But to tie in with what Chris had just mentioned, with all of those veteran-facing foundations and nonprofits, we're starting from a High Ground Foundation perspective to do outreach to these other organizations that are providing fantastic tools and resources specifically for the veteran community, and saying, hey, what can we do to broaden your charter, or what can we do to have an internal initiative for us that allows us to funnel you folks from the law enforcement community. And those conversations are going really well. We've made quite a bit of traction, but they're frustrating every time. It's almost like the veteran, and coming from a guy who's only ever been a veteran, who's only ever done the military thing, to see that these resources that have dramatically impacted my life and the lives of people that I love and care about, seeing them almost be put on a pedestal and not be made available on a broader scale for what I would just call across the board warriors. people who are willing to put it on the line for someone other than themselves. It's kind of a nonsensical separation.
Yeah, there's 140 years of law enforcement experience sitting in these chairs right here, and I don't think any time in our career have those resources been available to us.
It's shocking.
Yeah,
it truly is. And Dan has become Dan and Clint in that group has become a great champion at this point. But they're a lone voice right now.
Well, and I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to talk more about the research,
That's exactly
the data
where
points.
I was going.
Go ahead.
That's exactly where I was going is that I agree with you, Chris. We've got to have the research to be able to sit down in front of people and say, let us show you the data. We're getting ready to start some studies on that. Literally, we're working on those right now, and we'll make sure we pull you guys into some of that. But the goal is that we can actually have data to look at. Right now, we have to look at what's going on with veterans. There's very limited in law enforcement, and so we're going to do it here in Arkansas so that we can begin to measure ourselves and begin to really apply some of the resources that we need, and then be able to get funding to expand it. The challenge is we can do a small study, but we've got 14,000 officers in law enforcement officers in Arkansas. That doesn't include firefighters or EMS folks. So
or dispatchers.
Right.
I mean,
who's another? I mean,
our CADC, our internet crimes, civilian investigators. I mean, so that number is probably honestly 20, 25,000 across the state.
So we're looking at launching an initial study of about 120 folks in a variety of positions in law enforcement to begin to gather some data. That's through a partnership with University of Arkansas at Little Rock. And we're hoping to get that started by the end of the year. But we're at the very beginning of it, Chris, and you're exactly right. I mean, we're just right there. And so that we can get folks, if people are aware, they know there's a problem, but we've got to get specific. And that I agree with you completely.
If I could just, I've kind of said this, but let me go through, let me just say what operator syndrome is in terms of the domains. Let me just run that list again, just so we're real clear on that, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely, sir.
So it's this: traumatic brain injury, plus insomnia and sleep apnea, plus hormone dysfunction, typically low testosterone in men, and other, complicated hormonal dysregulation in females. Perceptual system impairments to hearing, vision, balance, chronic joint pain, headaches, substance abuse, especially alcohol, heavy alcohol use. Then a mixture of psychological issues, depression and anger, I would put at the top of that, plus anxiety, plus hypervigilance, plus PTSD symptoms. And then with all of that combined, you're going to inevitably have cognitive impairments to concentration, memory, organization, learning new things. And that all is going to bleed into marriage and parenting, to intimacy, and not just sexual intimacy, but also emotional intimacy. First responders are often told by their spouses, "You're not very sensitive. You're insensitive. But that's because your empathy level has been reset. Your idea of a stressful day is going to be very different from what a civilian considers to be a stressful day or a stressful event. You have the transition points, not just at the end of a career, not just at the end of a deployment, but at the end of every shift, going from work to home, work to home, work to home. Many responders have toxic exposures. Certainly firefighters do. Every time you go into an unknown environment, a structure fire, touching, bringing in a load of, arresting somebody with drugs. Touching fentanyl, not good. And then you get into the existential concerns of, moral injury, maybe feeling betrayed by a society that's not supporting first responders sufficiently. The horror and the thrill of what you might see on the job, the survivor's guilt. There's a whole lot of different ways in which that can turn out. And then as you've mentioned, this leaves many first responders at high risk for suicide. So we know that first responders have an extraordinarily high and tragic rate for taking their own lives.
Yeah, and we wonder why the divorce rate in the law enforcement realm hovers around 70 to 75%. You know,
No, sir. No, sir. It's higher than that. Because you got to count the multiple marriages.
oh well, okay then, sir.
140.
Yeah, I'm at 140% then, sir.
You won, sir.
Yeah, I
You
won. It's the only thing I have 100% average at, sir.
It's probably the case that 30% of marriages survive and endure. And of the 70% where they don't, there's often 2 wives, 3 wives, 4 wives, 4 marriages. I'm sorry, I shouldn't just say wives, multiple marriages.
Well,
And that's devastating in its own right. Sure
well,
is.
and to this point, Chris, let's add to that. So there's the 30% that survive, but are they thriving or are they just surviving? You know, that word "survive" is a good word.
That would be my thing. Is that 30%? How well are they surviving? But the next question behind that is how well are their kids surviving?
Yep.
Sure.
But he brought up a great point. Dr. Free did is we were at a seminar 2 weeks ago, and so we know we're dealing with all of these issues that you just named. I've got the list right here. Probably check the box. Everybody in this room can check the box on multiple of those. But a lot of times the triggering event is the marriage issue. Like 90%
Yes.
is the number we saw, is which leads to the taking of their own life.
That's exactly
They're
right.
dealing with all of this other things, and then the marriage is such a traumatic event added to everything else that it leads to.
Yep. Absolutely right. Which, circle that back around to what Sergeant said a little while ago, of we got to deal with the family as well. We can't just deal with the individual, even though that's critical, and they may be part of the catalyst of that, but we've got to deal with the family as a whole. So,
And in several of those cases that we're talking about in Arkansas, the spouse really wasn't aware of the problems that the officer had, and they were trying to communicate, and all that was doing was compiling to his issues, and it just made like it was a no-win. Where if they'd have had just someone to have been a mentor for just a little bit, it would have had a huge different outcome.
Well, it's a lack of understanding and a lack of culture that allows us to do that, right?
Yes.
So I consider myself a learner, a reader, a seeker of knowledge, a carnivore of knowledge, as Jason likes to say. And I've been, carnivore of knowledge. That's a T-shirt somewhere. But I have learned more about myself and the reason I struggle with certain things. I've learned more in the last probably 60 days, 90 days than I have in 30 years of doing this.
So and that's a good point that goes back to what Sarge said. But you're realizing it at 30 years. And once again, great that you're recognizing now. But what about that guy who's got 3 months on the job?
Yeah.
And how can we make a difference in his or her life?
That's the
at that
cultural
point?
change we
You
have to
bet.
make in the profession. Is these young men and women coming into the profession today, we have to build an environment and a culture where we're addressing these things early on and not waiting 32 years, 30 years, 30 years, 20 and 20. I mean, we're waiting too long to address the issues. So we've got to build a culture and an environment where we're successful at that.
and it's not going to accidentally happen.
No, it's
We
intentional.
have to be extremely intentional in doing this. Partnerships like what we're talking about here, where we have experts in different fields. But I think one of the things I'm excited about in Arkansas specifically is we've got a leadership environment that's saying we need to do something about this. And I love that.
Well, it's
I love
seasons,
that.
and we've talked about this. And I firmly believe that God has His hand on everything that we do. And to have dinner with a dear friend of ours, and you just happen to go, man, I heard something really cool, and he whips out that cell phone, and it's like, I got it. He's in Hawaii, and I remember going, Hawaii? Who actually lives in Hawaii? But then it's all of a sudden, here we are, Doc, that
Having breakfast
We're
at-
having
the
breakfast.
Marriott
Hearing you speak, having breakfast the next day, now leading to this. And I'm telling you, this is where this season that we are in, that maybe we get to do something. And I believe that we will, to make a difference for a guy or girl who's just now starting this career.
And to go back to what he's talking about the books and stuff, we need to burn that book that's been handed down from all the leadership, Suck It
Oh,
Up
brother,
Buttercup.
preach.
Yep.
We need to burn that. And if people would just look for just a second of what Suck It Up Buttercup, what that's really produced, if you go back and really look in time, they would know.
Well, what it's caused, and Chris, I know we're stealing the show from you. I
Yeah,
apologize.
sorry, Doc.
But what that suck it up buttercup mentality has created is a generation of broken LEOs across the country, of not facing broken marriages, broken spirits. You know, what do we do after this? Because I don't know anything other than this. That's what it's created.
So that's where I think we go back to our importance of servant leadership is the style, the leadership style that we need to incorporate so we know our people. So you look and go, hey, you're tired. Okay, what's going on? Why aren't you sleeping? Man, I hadn't slept in 4 days. Or I worked 18 hours and then had court at 6 a.m. You know, there's no reason to go to sleep. Or your diet. Hey, no offense, you've gained some weight. You look like there's something on. What do we need to do? Financial aspect, the family. Hey, what's going on, man? The wife and I are on the outs. Well, let's stop. A leader stops and goes, what can I do to plug in and help you survive that?
Or to Chris's point, we actually have a yearly physical that looks at our hormonal panel and says, hey, your testosterone's at 2, you know,
Yeah.
and
Might
how do
need
we
to do
address
something.
that?
Yeah.
Wow, it's just
Very proactive.
amazing what you have brought, Dr. Free, and I mean this. The ability for you to come to Arkansas in the first place, for you to take time to have a conversation with us, and hopefully reach a young man or woman that's going to go, I need to go research this. A leader of an agency goes, we need to step in and do something now.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for supporting the 10-8 podcast. This is Jonathan, your technical director. Join us in a couple of weeks as we continue the discussion with Dr. Chris Frueh and Dan Bradley. We're going to talk about solutions to operator syndrome. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and tell your friends about the 10-8 podcast. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next time.